the Global Driver session. You introduced us to a very innovative methodology to get these future scenarios about global drivers, right?
Yep.
So can you tell us a little more about the methodology and the findings in the methodology?
Sure. In September, we had a group of representatives from each basin come and meet us for a workshop, and one of the exercises that we underwent was a future scenario thinking exercise. So the methodology that we chose, which was a combination of different methodologies that have been used in the private and public sector, was a much more kind of visual way of dealing with it. So we had previously identified 5 different global drivers types, which are political and institutional, and the second one's economic, which deals with trade and benefit sharing mechanisms as well, and then the third one being demographics and population, and then kind of societal or social shifts related to that as well, and then a fourth being technological innovation, which is a little bit difficult to deal with, and that the fifth being environmental, or in this case on a global level, climate change. And so we had each of those drivers represented by a color, and all the participants were grouped into basins, and they were given rectangular cards and circular cards, and the goal was that they would write the trends on the rectangular cards, and then uncertainties answered in a certain way. So that an uncertainty would be posed by a question like, will climate change strongly and negatively affect fisheries? And it would be yes or no. So you would have 2 different circular papers with yes or no. And the idea was that you would then combine your trends and uncertainties to get a mix of them, so a mix of rectangles and circles, and then a mix of colors, so that you're looking at a diverse group of driver types to come up with scenarios. So there are various ways that different basin groups tried to do that. Some did best and worst case scenarios. Some kind of just tried to organically think about how certain trends and uncertainties fit together, and what stakeholders, and given stakeholders, what would be more likely to happen, and came up with a range of different scenarios that were not necessarily best case or worst case, but somewhere in between. And I think what came out of that process was, well, first of all, that scenarios building is in itself an act of learning about a collective ignorance and learning in a collective way. So trying to figure out what you do know, and more importantly, what you don't know. And then beyond that, I think in reading the scenarios and looking at the scenario cards, you'll see that there are a lot of similar challenges across all the basins. So those then are opportunities to share knowledge and to build learning together, and to innovate together to respond to similar problems.
Which were these similar things that the basins have?
Sure. One of them was foreign direct investment and concern about which way that would swing. So, for instance, in the Nile, there was concern about it leading to land grabbing, or on the flip side, it leading to an influx of technology and education that would then filter down to the local population in terms of jobs and knowledge and economic development. So that's one strong driver. Climate change is obviously a global phenomenon, and not always, but often affected basins in similar ways. There's population pressures, including migration trends. So Andre today and at the workshop spoke about the aging, 2 trends in Limpopo, which are the aging farmers, which is something that apparently is happening a lot, especially given AIDS. And then also the feminization of agriculture, which is, I think, a trend in almost all the basins, especially given migration to cities where men seasonally or totally migrate to cities, leaving women to do agriculture. So those are just a couple of similar trends.
Okay, thank you.